Good evening, one and all.
Good evening.
Hi. Barry and I were just reminiscing. We were taking a walk down memory lane. So, show of hands, anyone here remember Wayne's World?
Yes, unfortunately.
I
I
told you.
don't want to admit to it is what it came down to.
Yeah, it was how many? It was like 25, 30 years ago, right?
A long time.
All right.
It was really funny as a teenager.
It was, and it is pretty. All right. So here's my guilty pleasure for the day. All right. Since we're
What did I miss?
semi-confidential here. So, I was thinking about Black Lives Matter and policemen, and it only had one thing that came to mind: Bad Boys. So Will Smith, and it was amazing. It was funny. I was watching on the treadmill. It was 1995 that came out.
They came out with a two.
Yeah, I
Didn't
know.
they
I haven't seen
recently?
that. I'll watch that tomorrow on the treadmill. But all I can say is that was a pretty funny movie, and it reminded me a lot of what was the one with Mel Gibson there?
Lethal Weapon.
Oh, yeah.
Lethal
Yeah.
Weapon.
That
Yeah,
was good.
it was very lethal weapon like. But if you like a guy action bromance type, so that was my guilty pleasure. I know it's pretty tame. I need to do something else.
The Lethal Weapons were great. So were the Die Hards.
Yeah.
That's
know.
true.
Trivia note, my cousin by marriage played a role in Die Hard 2.
I just want to know where the money was. Who got the money?
I'm too old for this crap. That's all I'm going to say. So, Alan, I invited your friend Rod, but he looks like he's on an interview.
All right, well, that's good for him.
Good
Yeah.
thing.
So, we'll see. Good evening, Jessica, or good afternoon. How you doing?
I'm splendid, thank you.
Excellent.
And I just discovered that I can unmute myself using the bar.
The space bar. Yep. A lot of tips and tricks out there. So,
That
And
doesn't
then,
work for
and
me.
then go back.
yep. So, very exciting.
New shiny object here.
There's a lot of tricks here on Zoom. Be careful what you learn because they'll change it next week and then we'll start all over again. So, Catherine, how are you doing?
Really good. Except I don't like summer. I think today has to be the hottest day so far. And the last time, right before July 4th, when it hit 100 or a little above, we had the worst straight line windstorm ever. It looked like somebody put a bomb off.
Wow. I don't know if Lisa Calandro's calling, but I spoke to her Friday and she was saying her air conditioner, there was some work getting done. And she goes, I don't, with the heat and everything, I mean, it gets hot in New England, but down in Florida, Barry lost 40 pounds of water in the last 2 months, right?
Oh my.
How hot is it down there?
I'm still getting used to it. It's just very humid. This week it's going to be in the 90s all week with a minimum humidity of 65 to 70%.
It's the heat index, I think, of 101, 102. It just kills you.
Yeah.
My friend
Over the
just came back. He was telling me about it. It's terrible.
Over the weekend, my car said it was 94, but when I opened the phone, it said 94 feels like 105.
Nope.
Nasty.
Yikes.
And I went for a 9-mile bike ride last night. I am a glutton for punishment.
Yep. I could have told you that.
Rock star.
Yeah.
Not hardly.
How
My
you doing?
girlfriend, I didn't want to complain. I was wearing a helmet because, if I'm going to be road pizza, I'd at least like to keep my pretty face. But anyway,
How did you not drip away?
I was, but this was the first time I've ever done a long distance bike ride with a helmet on. I usually just do it around my neighborhood. So
Yeah.
we went, and at the end she goes, man, you are a rock star. You did that whole ride with your helmet on? I was like, what? Shit.
I don't like the helmet.
I know it's.
I'm a sweater.
I feel safer, but it's really, really hot, especially when
Yeah.
it's humid out. So we came up with a great idea, and I don't know if I'll ever patent it. If you want to try it, more power to you. But she said we should get those cooling towels, and instead of putting them around our neck, put a layer of them on the inside of the hat to keep our heads cool. I said, well, that's an
It
interesting.
gives new
thought.
meaning to hothead.
It'll be boiling like tea. It'll turn into tea.
But that'll take care of your hydration issues.
Rooibos. I'm a redhead, so I'll be rooibos.
Oh,
Anyway.
I have a black car and I've been doing work in my garage trying to declutter and purge, and I can't do it for much longer. I got to get the car back in because when I got in, it said 108.
Oh,
So thus the need of the garage here. The sun is so strong.
wow.
All right, you know what that means, liquid hydration. All right, so it's 7:06. We'll get going. Good evening, everyone. Welcome to our Monday night cocktails and conversation. This is our last call of June. Seems like we've been here for 3 months already. Went by fast. Well, actually, I don't think we shifted till Monday night until April. I forget. We used to do Tuesday night and we switched it to Monday, but sometimes I feel like I've been on Zoom forever. Doesn't it feel that way? So, but it's okay. Nice to see everyone tonight. We do have a number of new people signed up. I'm not sure where they are, but until they show up, I guess we can just mosey on along and catch up and see what's going on. I will share a little bit of interesting news, and Barry can attest to this. In Florida, there's been some activity over the last few days where some states are seeing a rise of COVID-19. It's funny, in Florida, the news hit, the numbers went up, but the same thing happened in Connecticut. The number of people went up, hospitalization went down, death rate went down. So I don't know if that's a good sign or a not so good sign. So I wanted to kind of open up and see what's going on, because on one hand, and this is the other sad part, my, Connecticut, New Jersey, and New York put on a 14-day quarantine from a number of states. North Carolina, South Carolina, Texas, I forget where else, Alabama. And I'm not sure what to think. On one hand, I thought there was light at the end of the tunnel. On the other hand, I don't know. Is this a balk? Are they priming us for the next summer mask season? I don't know. What are you guys seeing out there? Evan, you're in New York. What do you see?
Well, I mean, New York, everybody is still wearing the masks and being really diligent here. My friend, I just was on the phone with him, and I was telling him about coming to this group because he's in medical devices also. But he's eating dinner. He just came back from Sarasota, and he said down there, nobody's wearing masks, not even in the supermarkets. Now, was quarantined down there, but he did go out to dinner twice. Even at dinner, they might have 50% capacity, but they're not taking it seriously. And a lot of people think that it's a hoax, which is, he went out on a boat with some friends and the guy thought it was a hoax. And I'm like, they're crazy. And if that's in Florida, can you imagine what's happening in Texas and Mississippi and, all these other states? So it's kind of like wildfire. It's moving from here down there. I mean, upstate New York, it's also raging because we've already had it. So there's a herd, I think, immunity here to some degree. But I'll let you know, my mother-in-law's got a sore throat. So I'm like, just this today. My son just came back from Denver, so she's been exposed. We'll see.
Oh.
It's Evan, it's so funny. This morning I had a call, but I had to go to Home Depot, and then I went to Target because I needed something for the office. And the call, I went to Home Depot. I get there, half the staff have their mask excuse me, have their mask like this.
Oh,
So
don't get me
50%,
started. Yeah.
50% of the staff have well-protected chins. And I went to Target, it was the same thing. So I was on this call with the Chamber of Commerce, somebody, health department from our town. And I said, it's interesting because we're getting mixed messages. People who've been working the whole time on the front lines have basically said, either it's informal or very casual, I don't need to wear a mask. And then the big issue came up. What do you do if your children, if you have young children going back to school? And one of the women on the call, Catherine knows Sarah, she does some work with us, but her daughter is a camp instructor. She has 10 students, 10 campers. The children don't wear a mask, but her daughter has to wear a mask. And then, so we're talking about this, and then the head of the chamber came out with this great, he goes, I learned something new, and here's a guy who's really up to speed. So I thought, he said, you know,
I'm waiting.
you're going to love this one, Evan. Everyone's talking about we got to follow the guidelines. He comes out and he goes, you know, I don't have one here. He goes, I spent a lot of money on a mask, and then an N95 mask with a regulator flap, and I found out it doesn't protect people. And I said, Adam, you're kidding me, right? Those N95 masks with the one-way valve, you call for sneeze, everything comes out. They're designed when you breathe, because I use them in dust and pollen, when you breathe in, they only filter coming in. They don't filter going out. So Alan said this earlier. I see all these people walking around with these N95 masks that aren't doing the same.
But I didn't know that because I don't really wear them. I've never worn them for, you know, for work, doing that, you know, outside work. But I recently, I mean, or the last couple of months, I've seen people with these masks, and I'm like, and they said, oh yeah, I got it in my garage. I found them. It looks like it works. How many people are even regulating what they're using, what they're not using? So it's kind of scary. You got to make sure you're wearing something to protect yourself. But
that's the thing, that when you wear something, you're not protecting yourself. Wearing a mask is about protecting other people.
Others, yes.
Period.
And that's what the problem is. And I read something, a friend of mine is an internist, an infection prevention. He works in intensivist in South Carolina. And he wrote a post about COVID, but he talked more about healthcare. And I'm in healthcare, we're all in healthcare, but I mean, now that I'm back in nutrition, I mean, people, we want people to take better care of themselves, right? There's diabetes, there's heart disease, we've got morbid obesity, they're smoking. In healthcare, he says, you know, he was taking care of people, and it should be up to them to take responsibility. It shouldn't be mandated by the government, right? We don't want a fascist society, right? But I get it, but then he said, well, the difference, he made the correlation. He says, so all these healthcare challenges that we have take 30 years to kill people. But now we have something like COVID where you need to be diligent, it kills you in 30 days. So it's just changed the timeline. And I'm like, I had to bring it up on this group because that's a great way to talk to people about it. You know, talk about personal responsibility, because nobody takes responsibility for their eating habits, their smoking, I mean, you know, drinking, smoking.
And he's not looking at you when he says that.
No, I'm not talking, no, you can smoke a cigar, it's okay. But I'm talking about healthcare across the board. If you've dealt with patients, right? The ones I deal in wound care, so patients with diabetes, I mean, it's ridiculous at what level they're at.
Evan.
So, COVID's just bringing this to a head.
Evan, and you know this, right? And Clifford, I think you have some experience in this too. You know, when I used to call on podiatrists, and we always talked about the people with the diabetic foot and the wound care and the poor quality of bone. And I remember talking to one of my trauma surgeons, and he said 7 out of the top 10 diseases are self-imposed. Right?
Yeah.
Eating, smoking, drinking, drug use, high risk activity, obesity. So you look at all these. Now, some people, you know, we were just talking about you know how you go from one topic to another, and it's funny, and it's you step back and you look at this, and how do we address that not only as a country but as an individual? Clifford, did you ever run into any of this when you were out in the field with your work, your clients?
I was more in dealing with physician end of things
Okay.
and staff. So no, I really didn't. Obviously, going to cath labs on a regular basis, you see the results of what we're talking about. Or ditto with endoscopy and some of those other departments. But no, I was
All right.
truly in that end.
I'm married to a podiatrist, don't forget. So I
Right.
know
So you
what happens. But I mean, I would call on podiatrists, surgeon. I called on every modality. But you talk to a podiatrist, and I was a diabetes educator, and he's telling me he spent 6 months treating it with wound vac, and he's doing, allographic, he's putting allografts down, and then he's doing, Meta-Honey, and I'm like, he's doing all these things. And I said, have you thought about the patient's, it's called, I don't know if you guys, some of you are going to know A1C, just to know what their average blood sugar is.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh, that's a good idea. And I'm thinking about all the treatment for this patient for 6 months. How much money we spent in healthcare, and I used to teach, we don't treat the hole in the patient, we treat the whole patient. And unfortunately, that's what's happening out there in medicine. We're just,
Evan, your wife probably has non-compliant patients, right?
I'll be honest, she's just joining a big group right now, and she reads the Riot Act because her brother, both her parents, her brother's type 1, but since he's 12 and he's now in his 60s, and he's a diabetes educator because of me, I got him to do that, and he's a PA, and he works at the Barbara out in Denver, the famous clinic, the diabetes clinic. So she reads the Riot Act to all her patients, and she says, if you get even a little something, you come into that office. And honestly, she doesn't really see the wounds. And she's doing this practice, and they think she's going to be bringing all these wounds, but it's not about wounds. It's about prevention, right? The number one reason why patients end up in the hospital with diabetes is because of a diabetic foot ulcer. My brother's one of them. Just had surgery for a diabetic foot ulcer because he wouldn't listen to me. But that's family, right? So it's really interesting that healthcare can't really do this. Can't really fix it, but I think COVID is bringing it really to a head.
So, all right, and I know not everyone wants to talk about diabetic
talk too much.
wound care, but I'll share one funny story with you. So, do you guys know what an external fixator is?
Yes.
Anyone ever see an external? It's a device where they put metal pins into the bone instead of a cast, and you'll see people usually on the wrist, but on the tibia as well, because you don't want to put a cast on because people will get fracture disease from the cast. So if possible, they'll put these pins in. It almost looks like a scaffold externally. And you put it on for 2 months, maybe 3 months, and I had this doctor, and he was talking about non-compliant patients. And one day he goes to his office, and this patient showed up a year later with a motorcycle injury. And this patient had this external fixator on his tibia. Now the tibia, if you feel the inside of your tibia, you can feel the bone. Not a lot of soft tissue there. So 2/3 of the tibia has muscle around it. It nourishes the bone. 1/3 doesn't. It's a very hard bone to heal. However, this patient shows up. This doctor walks in, and he almost poops his pants. He's telling me the story. Usually, 2 things happen. This is where we're going to talk a little anatomy and science, but you'll appreciate this.
Sorry.
Thank you.
I like her little bell tone.
Yep.
Yeah.
So anytime you use a metal implant, whether it be a hip, a knee, a spine, any type of metal implant, the metal implant will always fail. It's always a race between the metal failing from fatigue or the bone healing. And if you think about taking a metal coat hanger and you just bend it enough times and it breaks, doesn't matter how thick the metal is, it will break over time because of metal fatigue. So the bone has to heal because it's live tissue. So when you walk in and see a patient showing up for a year, two things come to mind. You have a non-union or a malunion. The implant area is infected because you had these pins sticking out of the tissue for a year, or God knows what else you could happen, right? So this guy goes in, he goes, this guy who ride a motorcycle, very nice guy. He had some issues. I think they were drug related. He wouldn't say, but he just alluded to that. He said, but this guy wound looked perfect, meticulous pin care. He goes, I went in there, I took an x-ray, his bone was healed, and the guy just didn't want to come back. He goes, his skin, beautiful, pink, healthy. And every day he would clean his things and put dressings on. He goes, I gotta, he put the device on, he just unscrewed the pins and the patient went away. But this is the anomaly, right? That 1 out of a million. Yeah. When somebody shows up a year later from surgery, usually they're so it's amazing. But when he told me that story, it was like, oh my gosh. And he actually had the implant in his office because he was going to usually give it to the patient. The patient said, nah, I don't want it because it got in the way of riding his motorcycle.
It's so interesting when you see how far medicine has come, because I have a plate with 10 screws in the upper head of my humerus. Oh. And I had nothing on the outside except some glue and a couple of steri strips. I woke up from surgery and I went, holy crap. And then I saw the x-rays with all the pins holding my bone together. And I was just floored. So I thought I was going to be able to walk around with something so people would know I was injured. But instead, all I got was a sling and people kept knocking into me. And I was like, oh my God, you're killing me.
All right. Anyone else want to share any injuries and war stories before we jump into what's happening with everyone?
I'm the only klutz, I guess.
No, I got the electric stim going right now for the shoulder and the knee.
How did you do it? What happened?
It was snowing outside and I had accepted an interview for a job where I did not vet the woman who was interviewing me. Someone just said, I got you an interview with this woman that I know, and so I called her and we set an appointment. I had to go into Manhattan at 5 o'clock in the middle of January. So it was 3 p.m, it was snowing, and I was walking across the parking lot, which had not been shoveled or plowed. And then by the time I got to the steps, my shoes were wet, and I slipped down 2 flights of concrete stairs on my way to the train platform.
Ooh.
Yeah.
I'm lucky I'm not brain damaged or in a wheelchair. I mean,
are you rich?
Excuse me?
Are you rich?
No, the state of New Jersey has weather immunity, and the only way I would have won my case was negligence. My lawyer took the case because he thought they were negligent, but it turned out they are not obligated to sweep the stairs.
Wow, that sucks. Sorry.
Yeah.
I had my humerus rotated 90 degrees, and I was sent home in a sling, and I have a bar, and it was just screwed in. And what hurt was the incision.
Mm-hmm.
The bone healing, because I'd broken another bone. Well, actually, this was helping repair. But what I realized is the reason it didn't hurt is because the 2 pieces of bone were not rubbing against each other. They were held so stable because really bone doesn't have nerves or whatever per se. So it seems weird that broken bone would hurt. And what it is the friction when they move. So that's my little fun fact for the day.
Arthritis, then? Can you predict storms? Do you have arthritis?
I don't have arthritis. This is not about arthritis.
So what is it then? What do you have?
It was just that I'd broken the bone when I was a kid and it didn't heal correctly. So I went in as an adult to get it to, rotate it so it would be in the right position. And so they just sawed the humerus in half, rotated it, slapped the hardware onto it, and put it into a sling and sent me home.
Has anybody seen the museum that traveled the country, Body World? Did anyone? Okay, so for those who didn't, a person in Germany plasticized bodies, and the last one he did was about the brain. But they had other people. They had the two ice skaters in perfect form. And the bottom line is, what I'm getting at is, when you look at the body in that way, with the tendons, the nerves, the ligaments, the bone, you realize we're only human. As strange as it is to boil it down to that, we've come a very long way. I agree with the statement. We've come a long way in medicine. But from my perspective, after seeing that world, I guess it was museum piece, we have just scratched the surface. I still think we're in the embryonic stages of healthcare. We don't know how to cure the common cold. We don't know what to do with a virus that, when it takes over because of our bad hygiene and our bad habits of coughing and sneezing and, spitting, excuse the expression, when we're talking. But it just amazes me, when you look at that, you walk away and you say, we're just human. It's, it's simple as boils it down to that simple factor.
I think that's why the virus was so bad in China. I mean, when we were over there a couple of years ago, I was amazed. You walk around and you hear people go, and they spit everywhere. And I was like,
Oh yeah.
I'm thinking, it just dawned on me. They're big spitters over there, and that's why they got
Why is this turning into the grossest call we've ever had?
I'm gonna take a lead. You started it, okay? I'm just gonna say that much and back off.
All right, can we talk about something not as disgusting?
You worked in blood and guts and you're complaining?
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I'll just share one more story.
There you go. Come on, let's get grosser.
No, I can get pretty gross, but the
I
one
know.
thing was what's the word? I really struggled when they were intubating, was pretty okay, but when they were extubating people,
Yeah,
bringing that tube up, that was a lot of phlegm, a lot of stuff in the lungs, and that was the only thing that really got to me. And I don't know, I could tell you some stories, but I don't want you to lose your dinner. But all I can say is, thank goodness most of my work, it was like working in a carburetor, right? You could see a hole this big. Everyone had a gown on. You didn't really get to see stuff. But on the other hand, some of these big open orthopedic cases and some of these other general things, it's pretty amazing. All I can say is, in the military, you get to do a lot of things you don't get to do in civilian life. And I'll leave it at that.
Yeah, you do.
I can share something pretty gross. And,
Okay, come on, Melissa.
And recent. Well, I don't think it was gross. That's the thing. I thought it was super cool. I got to see a brain surgery on a woman that had a brain tumor that was the size of like an orange in her 40s in her head, and you could see the mark on her forehead, and then they pulled the skin back. It was so cool though, and it's for it's actually for it was just a few weeks ago for a company that I'm courting for a sales job in imaging. They're based out of Canada.
Okay, and anyone here who's been part of a delivery, that's pretty bad. Right? I mean, I know if you're a woman and you've given birth, you've been on the other end. But in the hospital, I've been on many natural deliveries, but I also have been on, we used to do C-sections, and that was pretty, it was pretty amazing. Helping a child come into this world the first time, very moving, right? Tears in my eyes. But some of these cases are pretty stressful. And we used to, the operating room at the sub base in New London was right next to the labor and delivery room. And we would get a call and say, we used to be ready to do C-sections in a moment's notice. And it's pretty amazing, some of the things you would see. But once you see a woman give birth, you're like, I'm glad I'm a man. And hallelujah. You know what? You remember that country song? Sometimes it's hard to be a woman. It is.
Birth or C-section? I've heard
Both.
Either one.
Either way,
Yeah.
C-section's way worse.
it is.
I wanted to see my C-section. I kept telling all the doctors, let me see, because I thought I was going to be put under, but I
Yeah.
wasn't. And I wanted to see the screen, but I couldn't. But my husband at the time turned green, and I had to keep checking on him. I'm like, he looks a little funny. I said, look at it, his color. At first he was like yellow. I'm like, he's starting to look green. And they're like, get him out, get him out.
Belly.
So
You
he
know,
couldn't handle it.
It was my wife. I'm used to seeing all that stuff, but it was, listen, I'm from New York. I work in the inner city. I had Brooklyn and Queens. That's like the war zone. I could tell you stories about the things that I saw, the things that I smelled,
Yeah.
and the things that doctors shouldn't have been doing.
Yeah.
But it's amazing to think back. Oh.
Well, think about this. A uterus is like this big, right? Empty. And when it, my youngest was 9-12. So think about the uterus like a balloon. It's just amazing when you look at that muscle.
Ouch.
Yeah.
But even more so, the abdominal compartment syndrome.
Yeah.
It was something that was just amazing how they could keep an open abdomen, put a machine in. They used my machine and then covered it with negative pressure. And they would go back within 48 hours. But sometimes the patient was so ill that they had to do it right in the ICU. And I'd be there helping them, watching. And it was like,
Wow.
it was pretty amazing watching some of these episodes, of what they could do.
Yep. So who has an upbeat story? Something clean. And Catherine had a story she was going to tell us.
I was just going to say that my friend's sister, she went in with her sister for an emergency C-section, and she said, I watched them. She said, I counted every organ as it came out, and I counted to make certain they had everyone put right back in.
Yep. Yep.
Well, I have
Did
an
you also, did you
That's
also count
upbeat,
the
Catherine.
tools?
Thanks.
Oh, sorry, Jessica, go ahead.
Did she also count the tools, the instruments?
Don't really know that. She just said, she just counted the organs.
Okay.
Hey, the
Just
Seinfeld,
to
when,
put in
remember?
perspective, we're very fortunate to be in the situation we're in and what we've all experienced in the stories that I'm hearing right now. My ER experience was one of a kind, Steve's experience in trauma. Everybody here, I'm just really, I don't know if we realize how fortunate we were in our past history. Let's just put it that way. I don't know what the future is going to bring, but people wish they could do what we did. And I think that we have to give each other a little bit of a compliment on that one. We've seen a lot and we've done a lot.
Thank you, Ellen.
The little round of applause.
No, I'm
Remember the
just,
Seinfeld?
it is what it is,
Violin.
Remember the
Barry.
Seinfeld when Kramer dropped the piece of candy and it went in the
Oh, yeah.
body?
The Junior Mint or something, was it?
Yeah, I think it was a Junior Mint. I was
Okay.
trying to think of what it was, if it was a Raisinette, but I think you're right. I think it was a Junior Mint.
All
I
right.
can't remember my own name some days, but I remember a Junior Mint.
All right. I don't want to tell any more gross stories because we'll never, you know what? You have a drink and you start telling war stories and they just go downhill from there.
Well, I wanted to mention something because what Ellen said. When I look back on my life and things that I'm proud that I chose to do, I'm really proud of working with the cochlear implant program and securing the first FDA approval on an implant to replace one of the 5 senses. And with 3M, because they usually make things that are 2-dimensional, they make them by the vial and sell it by the, they make it by the mile and sell it by the inch. They make it by the vial. I don't know, whatever. Gallon, sell it by the vial. These were not 2-dimensional. These were implants that had batteries and that hooked up to the outside, and I traveled 50 weeks out of the year to 3 or 4 cities a week, and so it took a toll on all my relationships. Grim didn't pay us anything more than if I would have been peddling Post-it notes and not traveling. That was the pay scale was the same for everyone, no matter what you did. And yet I look upon that as one of the things I'm proudest of that I did in my whole life, because I was all in and so passionate, and being able to sit in a doctor's office with the family, the patient, the staff, and hook up the outside portion and see somebody here for the first time in their life was, and so Alan is absolutely correct. We are privileged to have been, each of us have been a part of something comparable, and we're, yeah, I'm very grateful. But thanks for reminding me, Alan, because
Well, it's just like I said, I think we all just sort of sit back and we say what we did. And, you know, I held a human heart in my hand when I was in the ER. And to this day, you know, I have to, you know, kind of remind myself I was in the right place at the right time, fortunately. Today, I could not have done that because I wouldn't have had the license to be in the situation I was in. But I think we all can help each other, networking as we've done. I think we all have something, you know, some ability to say, you know, I've done this and I've the passion, I've got the commitment. That's what I tell in every interview. You can find somebody who has a more big of a degree, PhD, master's, whatever. You can find somebody who can stay up, you know, travel, but they're never going to have the passion that I have. And I just want you to take that to the bank.
All right. I get that. Thank you. And Jessica, it is great to see somebody, to know we were part of that healing process and helping people get back to that life that they have. And Alan, every little part, whether you're the beginning first person on the scene or the last person they see leaving the hospital or physical therapy. And I worked in a outpatient, I worked in the surgeon's office for a while, seeing post-op patients, and we would see them pre-op and post-op, and I was first assisting for a while when I was working in the OR, and I got to see them through that whole continuum of care, and being part of that process, it is very rewarding. That's why not only did we practice in some way in our clinical roles, but we also did that as part of our sales role, because a lot of us have that caregiver attitude. So that's a great way to approach that. So thank you.
And we developed the relationships with the physicians and surgeons where they respected us. They looked upon us as someone to collaborate with. We weren't just some salesperson that was coming up in and yammering at them and hoping they'd buy their product. And that's what set us apart. And it came through because of our passion, our being all in. Like, I'm going to make this happen. My degree's in speech science and audiology, and when I went to school, what they said was, when someone's totally deaf, there's nothing that can be done for them. You know, when it's with the inner ear portion. So when I found out about this at 3M, and they gave me the option of going to work early for them and working in their med-surg area, and I said, no, I'm believing that because I'm in the hiring process for the cochlear implant program, they haven't made me an offer, and it's not going to happen until 4 to 6 months from now. But if I couldn't like switch when it became available, which they said I couldn't, then I'm holding out. And at the last minute, the people I've been in touch with about being hired for the cochlear implant program told me there was a hiring freeze, and they were not supposed to hire anyone from outside. And they had to get 4 levels of VPs to sign off on hiring me. And then I just turned out to be the most, by far, successful rep they had. And it's because I was all in.
So Steve, I've got a question for you, if you don't mind, based on the stories that we've heard in the last half hour or so. How much of that do you bring into an interview, as I would call it, dwell on it? And how much of it do you simply bring into the future of what can I do for you? Where do my skills come in with your company? What is the 60, 40, 30, you know, how much of this they say, well, you've lived it. So, okay, now what are you going to do with it? How much of that?
Right. So it's a good point. And Jessica, I'm sure this is part of your story as well. I'm a big proponent of telling your story, not just showing the bullet points, right? So part of it is your story takes the bullet points on your resume and weaves it together in a tale that's compelling. That's why one of the tools, the sales tools you have, your literature, is your brag book, your resume, your 30, 60, 90-day plan. Your brag book is so powerful when used properly. This is when you take some of these elements and you sprinkle them in your brag book. Think about being part of a trauma surgery for 12 hours or going in during a snowstorm to help out, right? Customer service, right? You think about what are the elements that you can take from here. No different than being an athlete. So, Barry talked about an implant. I broke my wrist playing football in high school. I didn't know it broke. This was a scaphoid fracture. I taped it up, thought it was sprained, and in the military, I had to do push-ups on my fist because I couldn't bend my wrist back. But one of the things 10 years later, they went in and they fixed it with a screw. But just like an athlete, what is it about playing sports that you can transfer to the sales process, right? Getting hit, being knocked down, coming back, being part of the team, being able to put a plan together and execute it, right? Being able to be a team leader and a team follower. So when you think about your clinical experiences and what you had to do, the results of that, the learning moment, is what you want to share with people. And the way you do that is, again, take a picture, put it in your brag book, throw it in front of them and just lay it there. And when they pick it up and they thumb through and they say, wow, that's an interesting picture. Why is it the picture of an ambulance? Why is it a picture of a bone of a tibia? That's a great story. Let me tell you about that polytrauma patient came in and they had no chance of making it through the night, but we had to stabilize them. The nurses were freaked out. You had the neurosurgeon, you had the orthopedic surgeon, you had the general surgeon. They're all working at once. I was able to go in there and orchestrate under stress to help them put together the external, internal fixation to stabilize that patient. Fixing your bones aren't life or death unless it's a polytrauma patient and they're bleeding out and you need to stabilize them. The orthopedic surgeon goes in first, second, third, depending on the priority. But the thing is, working under pressure, being able to rise to the occasion, and the way you present this is so compelling. And when you ask them, what type of person are you looking for on your team? Somebody that can handle the stress, can navigate, develop a solution on the fly, overcome problems and challenges? Or do you want someone sitting there waiting for a nice, easy path? Or do you wait for someone to run towards the fire versus run away? And that's the type of person that you want to be there, right? Take your experience and mold it to what they're looking for. And I think, Alan, that's the story you want to tell. And we all have those great adventures and those great experiences. Maybe there's 1, 2, or 3 that come to mind, but those are telling points, right? Everything you've done up to this point has prepared you for this role. Your training, your background, your experience. That's the part you want to be able to articulate. You have to be the ultimate storyteller of your background, of your product, of your services. Your resume does a poor job. Unless you're an excellent writer, very few of us are, except Barry. But it's hard to get that emotion, right? When you're looking somebody in the eye and you're sharing your story, it's so powerful. It's so compelling. It's so inspirational.
Nobody hires from a resume, though.
Exactly. But they get you the interview.
Get you in there. Get you in the door.
And they want to hear that, right? The reason you come in is because they want to hear how you can fill the gaps in. And if you're just going to say there, look at my resume, that's great. Oh yeah, you hit a home run, you hit a grand slam, that's great. But what else did you do? What did you have to overcome? What did you do to navigate? anyone can go out there and build relationships, right? We laugh about this. I'm a great communicator. I build relationships. So does every other sales professional. But why should I hire you for this role? And this
I'd like to give everybody a little addendum to this whole thought branch and tell you an interesting application of this tactic. Some of you know I used to be a makeup artist, and I'm in sales, but I'm more of an account manager person. But that doesn't mean that I'm not still motivated to be successful. And I got an interview with a very large medical device company where their clinical trainers were expected to have very hefty sales goals, even though it was disposables. So they wanted somebody who wasn't necessarily a hunter, but wasn't afraid to close the sale. And Steve and I, a couple of years ago, had worked on a brag book for me. And because I was working in one of my positions with something that there was no visual for, and the visuals are freaky because nobody wants to see a picture of Minority Report, I had to come up with a way to show that I was still incentivizable, financially speaking. So in my brag book, and I remember because when I did it, Steve was like, why is that in there? So for him to ask, mission accomplished. I put a picture of a tungsten pearl 2006 Lexus IS 250 on its own page. And they're flipping through my book and it's like, what is this? I'm like, that represents the 500 keratoconus cases that I brought into the practice and went from 5 to 500. And that's the trophy that I bought myself. And they're like, oh. See, so you can still be creative if there's not a picture that represents what you can do, because it gets the mission accomplished. They asked me a question and begged me to tell them the story. Right? So, and everything is only about what you need to get you to the next step. Just like your resume gets you in the door, your first interview gets you a second interview. Your second interview gets you a face-to-face. Because so many people get so far ahead of themselves and they just work themselves into a tizzy instead of just focusing on what comes next. So if you have a skill that doesn't have a good visual to go with it, get creative and put something in there that forces them to ask you a question that correlates to whatever the story is that goes with it. That's it.
Thank you very much.
My pleasure.
Who else has a good story from their background that they'd like to share? Inspirational, yet not bloody or disgusting.
Well, I'll support what I did about 2 weeks ago with a gentleman that I connected with Northwest Alpine, and he was telling me 2 weeks ago he's dealing with a very difficult fraud case. And this morning, since I hadn't heard from him, I got a bunch of mixed nuts from one of our outdoor vending thing. We call it the Saturday market. And I took it in this morning and I said, I hope this has been driving him nuts, because he certainly has been dwelling on it. And the girl looked at me and I said, he told me about the 250,000. Oh, he shared that with you. And I said, yeah. She goes, well, he didn't share that with everybody. And so she looked at the bag of nuts and she looked at it. She says, this is she goes, I like this. She's going to enjoy it. Now, where it's going to lead, I don't know. But sometimes, again, as I've said in the past, you got to separate yourself. And I'm sure even if he interviewed multiple people. So that's my inspiration, is just think out of the box. That's, sometimes it backfires. I'll be the first to admit to that. But at least they know you're willing to take a risk. You're still out there. You know what's going on. So try something a little bit different in your interviews, or as a reminder to the people you've interviewed with. And some people will say, well, what do I do? Do I call them? Do I not call them? And I agree that I've said it in the past, I don't want to play the game anymore. Everyone plays the game. So I just decided to put a little humor into it, and hopefully he'll recognize it in contact. But I think everybody has that within them.
Thank you. Well said. And it is a skill. It is something that we practice, no doubt about it. And the tough part for many of us, we've been taught, trained not to speak about ourselves in a positive way. And yet when people say, what did you accomplish? And my wife says this to me all the time. She goes, you never really take credit for it. I'm like, my actions will speak for my. And the tough part is nobody knows unless you tell them sometimes. And yet sometimes I want to be under the radar, but that's a habit, right? We don't want to bring attention to ourselves. So the sales and marketing of our background and our experiences are probably one of the hardest things that we do. Melissa, what's your thought? You're shaking your head like you've been there. Oh, you're muted, Melissa.
Still muted. There we go.
Okay, sorry about that. I did think of something and it's silly and it dates me. So I don't think I kind of think I don't think I should use it anymore.
We're all friends here.
I had been calling on a hospital here in the Denver area for like months, and I was getting business from a sister hospital, and I was like, why aren't they giving me any business? And I kept going in there because it was like close in proximity. It was right there. So I found out who this decision-making person was, but I couldn't get past the gatekeeper. And one day I went at like the lunch hour and there was no gatekeeper. And they had recognized me, like somebody recognized me from going there so many times. They're like, oh yeah, just go to her office. So I was like, so I went to in their office and I collected clues. I was a detective. And I'm like, based on what I see, she likes golf and she collects Beanie Babies. So, and specifically bird Beanie Babies. So I went to the gift shop because they sold them there, and I found this one bird that she didn't have. I just took a guess, and that's what got me into the hospital. And I never even met her. It was like I put the bird, well, no, I think I had to go buy it and come back, and then I gave her the bird. So I did meet her in person, but this was a little while ago. But a $5 Beanie Baby got me into a big account. And then I bought her something else that was golf related. So.
Well, Melissa, and that's a great example of reading people and knowing what they need at that time, right? This is the tough part. Sales professionals get a bad rap because we get accused of selling a product or service that people don't need. And we sell what we have versus what they need. And it is hard sometimes. And the company's like, you got to sell. Well, guess what? It's all about finding the right solution at the right time, right? And knowing that, but being aware of that. That's why I think, well, a few weeks ago, we tried to talk about the soft skills part. It's so important. What's the difference between a good salesperson versus a great salesperson? There's a lot of factors, but soft skills, emotional intelligence are part of that. So,
and detective work.
Well, yes. Columbo, he's my favorite. Anyone know who Columbo is?
Yep.
I like the cigars.
That's right. He was a classic, and people used to laugh at him. He was so unassuming.
By the way,
that's right.
One last question.
I got one more question. But you know what? It's a great approach, and different styles, right? So part of it is this is where finding your sweet spot is so important.
Mm-hmm.
What makes you different than someone else? Not better, different. Because you're all going to be different in your own way.
And I can give you an example of two little teeny tiny things that will set you apart from other people. And this actually came from the administrator of the practice that I worked in. She was my boss. And she told me at one point, we used to sit back to back because we shared an office. And she was like, that rep is always allowed in here. And I'm like, really? Why her and not anybody else? And she looked at me and she goes, because she's really smart. She asked me what my favorite drink at Starbucks is. And every time she comes here, whether she needs to see the doctor or not, she has my favorite Starbucks in her left hand. That's number one. Number two, I had a doctor that I visited probably once every 6 weeks or so. We were trying to get him to refer us more medical cases. And I noticed that he always, always, always had a big bowl of Hershey's Kisses on his desk in his personal office. So I knew he loved chocolate. Well, any rep in the world can stop at Walmart and buy the guy a 2-pound bag of Hershey's. For that same $7, I bought him 3 pieces of handmade Swiss chocolate in a box with a bow. And that was me. I was the one who was always allowed in his office because I just went that little tiny extra step. And instead of spending $6.99 on Hershey's, I spent $7 and whatever cents, $7.51 on 3 truffles from Tutor Chocolates.
Okay, now I want chocolate. Thank you, Barry.
Sorry.
Sorry, I haven't had dinner yet, but thank you for reminding me. I can do some chocolate.
So, you know, if you have a creative bone in your body, just put it to use in these types of situations and do that little tiny bit of thinking outside the box and just go one little tiny step above what everybody else does. Because otherwise you fit in. And sometimes all you need is that little tiny, you know, like the thread that has a tear and you pull that little tiny piece and the next thing you know, the whole thing unravels. We'll do that in reverse and you win the prize just for pulling on that one thread with the chocolate. So.
All right. So all I can say is it's almost top of the hour and I've been grossed out. So thank you very
You're
much.
hungry. You're hungry too.
I am slightly hungry, yes, but it is. We had a
How could you be?
good
How
time.
could you be
Eating too.
grossed out since you worked since you did your operating room stuff?
It's different when you're there, but when I visualize other people's stories, I always imagine the worst. I've been in some pretty nasty stuff, and you know, you step back and you're like, ah, it's not a big deal at the time, but in retrospect, when you think about it, sometimes you don't want to think about it. You just do it. So now, listening to everybody, I'm like, oh, everyone has a nasty story to share. Well, listen, if you have children, it doesn't get, or pets, it doesn't get much worse than that. So, all right.
I want to do one favor that nobody asked me for, but I'm going to do it. And this is, I want to plug Catherine. She was nice enough. I'm traveling to Boston for a week in 2 weeks. And I have disposable paper masks from the dollar store that are 20 years old. And I saw all that fabric in her closet. I said, do you have any purple fabric? And do you make masks by any chance? She said, yes, I do.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So now I have
Oh,
a turquoise mask
Very
and a
nice.
yellow mask for summer because it's sunny and cheerful.
Nice.
Purple. Ooh,
Those are pretty
there's-
substantial.
So
Ah,
if you need masks, you hit Catherine up. She'll take care of you.
well, you
oh,
guys,
Catherine.
you guys got the reminder with the leopard one, right? She made for my wife. So,
Oh,
That
I
was
didn't
a
know Catherine
Catherine's.
made that.
yep,
Yeah.
Catherine made that as well.
Oh, wow.
Yep.
It's
So I
awesome.
Nice.
Yep, among other things. You see all that
Barry,
fabric
what are you
behind?
going to Boston for?
My birthday to visit my girlfriend.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you.
Yes, happy birthday.
Thank you.
We'll celebrate. All right, so I'm going to share an announcement before we leave. We talked about this COVID-19 thing, right? So as I mentioned a couple weeks ago, I'm going to share my screen because I want to give you guys a heads up what's happening. Since you're here, you get the early preview, so to speak. So let's see. This is the OR Lounge. This was my membership site that I put in place probably 8 years ago for my clients. And back in LinkedIn, I would have our calls and we had a membership site. And I called it the OR Lounge because that's where I did a lot of networking. That's one of the groups that we have on LinkedIn. And this was a great place. We had our podcast, we had videos, we had a member forum, and this was a really great place because all of this stuff we're doing would allow us to continue it offline. So what happened was a few years ago, I had to take a sabbatical because of some personal reasons with my wife and her family. So the OR Lounge was put in a hiatus. But the good thing is COVID-19 gave us an opportunity to bring it back. And what we're doing is launching the MVP Club. And you're all invited, and you all will get complimentary memberships. So we're going to take our calls and our community and just move it over to the MVP Club, because this is something that we're doing this, but part of it is I don't want LinkedIn to be the people that run this, right? So part of this, when people are coming in, and the OR Lounge was very active. We had a number of people and we had great calls, but remember, we didn't have Zoom back then. I don't even know if we had an equivalent. I would do webinars, we would have conference calls, and up to date, this has been the grossest call we've ever been on. So that's a special one.
Win
So-
surprise.
Right. So what's going to happen is the MVP Club, I'll be launching that next week, and we're going to start transitioning to that. So our Thursday call, this group will be, you guys will be grandfathered in. And then the Monday call, again, we're going to try to keep it mostly for LinkedIn Q&A and for new members. We may cut it back a couple times, but we have to, just because of our nature here of doing that there. It will be easier for you guys to network. We're going to have a private LinkedIn group if you want to do that, but there'll also be a forum and other stuff we'll be doing there. So just keep an eye open for that. And I just want to give you a heads up. So thank you.
We're
Looks
very
great.
excited.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you.
thank
Yeah.
you. And you'll keep us updated via email?
Oh yeah. Hopefully the thing is, as you know, everything's been delayed, right? So we've been working on this. So back in 2007, and Barry knows the story, the first LinkedIn group I made was the OR Lounge, right? This is the place where I did all my networking, and I wanted to build my community to bring people together, but the technology was just coming out, right? So to speak. So we used LinkedIn for a while, but we needed to get to that next level. So really, this group and some other groups that we've been having calls with prompted us a few months ago to get this stuff working. So our goal was to get this out by June 1st. Unfortunately, you know, the best laid plans. I'm going to blame COVID-19 delayed us. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. But just keep an eye open for that. Also, some of the other workshops we want to do, this will give us a better platform to present that. So if you get the message, it's still us. We're just inviting you to join our private club. So I think that's it. Any other questions? Anyone have any interviews coming up or any news that they'd like to share before we wrap it up? Really? All of a sudden, everyone's quiet. Melissa, you haven't had any interviews in the last week?
No, I
No?
had an informational call with Jim Trainer today.
Oh, good. How'd it go?
It went all right.
Okay. Cliff, what about you? Anything in your neck of the woods?
He's muted.
I mean, it helps if I unmute. Things are slowly moving forward. It's low.
Yeah. Well, this is the part, and this is the whole thing with COVID-19. I don't know if it's, on one hand, a month ago or 3 weeks ago, things were ready to move forward. And I don't know if they're putting the brakes on things because of the increase in cases. Personally, I think it's because they're doing more testing, but I don't know what to believe. I don't know. I mean, you can't say the numbers of hospitalization and deaths are going down. Of course, the increased rates. I mean, I think the majority of the people who are testing positive are asymptomatic. So I don't know.
So it's kind of good and bad news. I did some networking at the dog park this weekend and met and got 3 phone numbers. So I have some leads there that I've got to follow up on.
Wow.
But
That's
I know.
impressive.
Yeah,
Free.
Wow.
wow. Well, and I'm wondering if because of our field that we're in, medical, other industries can kind of shut down or pull back, but medical keeps going on. I mean, we talked about baby deliveries. Women who are pregnant don't say, well, I'm just going to put a halt on the pregnancy process until this goes away, or somebody who's got, in fact, they're trying to get people to understand, as you all know, that if you have heart attack symptoms or other things, don't hold back on going in just because of the virus happening. We know we need to take care of you. So I think we're in a better situation because of the field we're in.
True.
And I had a friend who isn't in the medical field, but she's really hard hitting looking for a job. And she emailed me, she's in Minnesota. She emailed me a couple days ago about when she sees something posted that she'd applied for and the posting went down and she didn't get any traction, but now they posted the job again. Should she follow up? And I just said, yeah, you never know what's going on. You don't know the backstory.
Or reapply.
Well, yeah, that's what I meant. It's like, just take some sort of steps. Don't just ignore it and move on. I had a situation, this is back before we did electronically, where I had applied for a job and I followed up with the hiring manager and somehow my resume had never reached him. And we talked on the phone, and when he found out my background, he set up an interview. And had I not reached out, I wouldn't have even gotten that far. I came in close, but he did interview someone who had previous experience in that particular type of, medical device. So I grudgingly can agree that he made the good decision. But, it just always, I just believe that we can keep the activity up and we'll be successful.
Yep. Thank you, Jessica. I agree. I think the interesting part, the people who are going to be successful during this transition, it's all about attitude and positioning, right? Thinking positive. This is a bump in the road. And you know what? Companies still need good people. So you're good people. And part of this is being in the right place at the right time. We talked about that. Being strategic as much as possible, and networking. I think those are the 3 key things you can do over the next, summer's a tough time, no doubt about it, right? We're getting out of COVID-19. Hopefully we're going to phase 2 of opening, but people are chomping at the bit because they need to get back to normal, whatever that means. They can't continue the way we're going. So organizations are looking, and people are still putting jobs out. In the medical device distributors group, there are a number of companies that are looking for independent distributors. So I know you guys aren't looking for those particular roles, but that's encouraging because other companies are looking for part-time, full-time sales help as well. All right. Anything else before we wrap it up?
Wait, what did you call that? Medical device what?
I'll give you the link in the chat. Melissa, are you in the women in medical device sales group? Really?
No, I was asking Barry about it when I talked to her, but I haven't. I need to do it.
All right. Well, did I share that article with you about why I started a couple weeks ago? You might not have been here. I shared the article why I started the LinkedIn groups, and it had all the links for the groups in it.
Oh, I don't know.
Okay.
I can look back on the emails.
It's okay. I'll just share it with you again. other thoughts? Anyone doing anything for the 4th of July? I mean, it's not like we can do much.
Steve, I don't think I'm in the women group on LinkedIn either.
Okay,
Uh,
let me.
Share that link.
Is that it? Oh, Barry just did it, right? Is that the women's group, Barry?
Oh, that's the distributors.
Oh, independent distributors. That's what he called it, right? Independent distributors?
Medical device distributors and independent reps.
Do you mind just sharing that whole list with everybody again, if you don't mind?
Yep, it's it's out there. So
All right.
these are all the groups. This is the article that has all the links to all the groups. I think they still work, but you can search them if they're not there. But
Okay.
this is, one size doesn't fit all. And in the independent group, and also in the women's group, I just approved a post. There's a woman in there from Leica. What's that lens company, Leica? They were posting a job. So that group has some, the women's group has some recruiters and their internal recruiters. So unfortunately, we don't let a lot of outside recruiters in the group, but I do let internal recruiters in if they work directly for the company. Some of the outside recruiters are very mercenary, and unfortunately, if they treat Barry well, if they don't treat people well, we don't let them in the group, unfortunately. So we haven't had good luck. So
She's a good gatekeeper.
she is, among other things. So good copy and proofer. So, but I think that's it. In the meantime, we're not going to have a Thursday call. Like I said, we're going to take a break on Thursdays for July. I'm going to be shifting things over to the MVP Club. We may come back to that in August, because it's still working time-wise. But unfortunately, as you know, the one thing we don't have is time, right? So part of this is we're trying to figure out the best schedule for everybody. We'll still be here on Mondays, and I'm going to figure out the best time. So if you have any ideas, let me know. And,
What about this coming Monday with the holiday? Are we still going to meet this coming Monday?
Well, that's an interesting one. Let me ask you this. Some people are taking Friday off. Some people are taking Monday off. What are you guys doing as a group?
In between projects.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we can still meet next Monday. I'm
Well, I can meet on Monday at 5. I'm available.
Okay. So here's the thing. We'll have the call on Monday unless something happens, but, I'm probably going to cut out early on Friday and do yard work again, celebrate the 4th. Very exciting cleaning out.
Watch fireworks on the TV.
They canceled my fireworks. I just
Yeah,
They
they
canceled
canceled
a
them
lot.
here too.
very disappointed.
We used to go up to Boston and John Williams would be up there, with the Boston Pops growing up, and it was amazing. And I don't know. Not like the old days. Now the dog, we stay home, we put our earmuffs on the dog so the dog doesn't get afraid of fireworks.
My dog shakes, one of them, and the other one's fine, but she gets real scared and shakes. So I'm going to have to be close by her, taking care of her. It's already started. People are starting to blast them off already.
Oh, but they've been blasting for 2 weeks now.
These
Right.
2 weeks.
Have you tried a
Off and on.
thunder shirt?
Yes, and it didn't work, but I went and I got her like a size 2T toddler shirt and put a t-shirt on, but the thunder shirt didn't seem to work, but it just has to be tight. And then I've also done like a heavy weighted blanket on top of her too, but she still shakes. It's awful. Poor baby.
I know. Well, whatever you're doing this weekend, have fun, be safe, stay away from COVID-19 people if you see them.
Wear your mask.
I don't,
Very much.
we're going to have the
Enjoy your
Scarlet C on our chest, right? So I don't know, but have a great day. thanks for stopping by. We'll catch up with you soon.
Happy 4th, everyone.
Thank
Happy
you.
4th.
Everybody.
Bye,
Stay
Jessica.
safe.
Bye, Cliff. Bye, Alan. Bye,
Bye.
Evan. Bye, Melissa. Bye, Catherine. All right. Let's see.
Ah. That Lexus, did you remember?